$6.4 billion international bridge has been fully completed, tested, and is technically ready to open to traffic. Yet despite being finished, it remains closed. 4. Held back by a single political decision and a growing legal and economic dispute. This is not a simple case of construction delays, funding shortages, or bureaucratic backlog. 4. The situation is rooted in a decades-old control over one of North America's most critical trade corridors, control that has been dominated by a private family enterprise for nearly a century. 4. The United States government did not contribute financially to the construction of this bridge. Not a single federal dollar went into its $6.4 billion cost, and yet, the opening of the structure now depends on authorization that sits at the highest level of the U.S. executive branch, effectively requiring a single approval to proceed. On February 9, 2026, former President Donald Trump issued a public statement on Truth Social indicating intent to halt the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge. Earlier that same day, members of the Maroon family, the private owners of the competing Ambassador Bridge, held a closed-door meeting at the U.S. Department of Commerce with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Within hours of that meeting, a Trump statement followed. The New York Times later referenced the meeting, citing officials familiar with the matter. While no direct causation has been confirmed, the sequence of events is part of the official public timeline and is central to understanding the controversy. To understand the stakes, one must first understand the structure itself. The Gordie Howe International Bridge links Windsor, Ontario, and Detroit, Michigan, spanning the Detroit River. It is a 6-lane cable-stayed bridge extending approximately 2.5 kilometers. The entire project was financed by Canada under a bilateral infrastructure arrangement. The 2012 Canada-Michigan Crossing Agreement, signed by the Government of Canada, the State of Michigan, the U.S. State Department, and the Department of Homeland Security, established the framework. Under its terms, Canada funded construction entirely. The state of Michigan provided land access on the U.S. side. Ownership of the bridge is divided equally between Canada and Michigan. Canada recovers its investment through toll collection over a 30-year period, after which revenue is shared equally between both sides indefinitely. The U.S. federal government holds no financial stake in the project. Despite being fully completed after 8 years of construction, the bridge remains unopened in early 2026. The underlying tension, however, is not purely governmental. It is deeply tied to private economic interests. Since 1929, the Ambassador Bridge, privately owned by the Maroon family, has controlled the primary commercial crossing between Detroit and Windsor. For nearly 97 years, it has functioned as the dominant freight corridor between the United States and Canada. Handling approximately 1/4 of all truck trade between the two nations, valued at tens of billions of dollars annually. For decades, this single privately controlled crossing operated with limited competition, allowing significant control over pricing and traffic flow. However, by the early 2000s, concerns escalated among industry leaders and governments. Congestion increased dramatically, with trucks waiting hours to cross. Automotive manufacturers warned that disruption at this single point could halt supply chains across multiple U.S. states and Canadian provinces. The strategic importance of the corridor led both governments to pursue a second crossing to reduce dependency on a privately controlled monopoly. The Maroon family strongly opposed this development. They financed political campaigns in Michigan aimed at blocking the new bridge in 2012, but voters rejected the initiative. Subsequent legal challenges also failed. Construction of the Gordie Howe Bridge began in 2018 and has now reached full completion. The new bridge introduces significantly lower toll rates, approximately half the cost of the Ambassador Bridge, creating a direct competitive threat. Once operational, major logistics companies are expected to shift freight volume to the newer, more efficient crossing, fundamentally altering the market balance that has existed for nearly a century. This economic shift is at the center of the dispute. Following the February 9th statement, Trump claimed that the United States should receive partial ownership of the asset. However, this assertion conflicts with the legal framework already in place. Under the 2012 agreement, ownership is already split equally between Canada and the state of Michigan. This has been confirmed by multiple officials, including former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, who signed the original agreement, as well as statements from the Michigan Governor's Office and the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. Congressional representatives from both parties have also acknowledged the 50-50 ownership structure. Subsequent clarification from the administration suggested Canada controls land on both sides of the bridge, but that claim is also inconsistent with records showing the Michigan Department of Transportation acquired the U.S. land over time through formal purchases. Within a short period, multiple claims regarding ownership and land control were publicly corrected by relevant authorities, leaving the legal structure unchanged. This raises a critical question. If ownership and land claims are already settled, what is actually being contested? The practical issue centers on revenue control and political leverage over the bridge's opening authorization. The federal permit required to activate full operations remains the final administrative barrier. Canadian leadership, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, has maintained a consistent position. The agreement is binding, ownership is already defined, and toll revenue distribution is pre-established. No renegotiation is being pursued. Meanwhile, the bridge itself stands fully prepared for operation. Toll systems are installed and tested. Customs facilities are complete. Road connections on both sides have been finalized. Lighting systems are active. Staffing is in place. Published toll rates are set at approximately 5.75 cents USBs for passenger vehicles and $8. 75 per axle for commercial trucks, with electronic discounts reducing costs further. Everything required for operation exists today. Only the final authorization remains outstanding. Politically, pressure is increasing across the United States. Michigan lawmakers from both parties, including Senator Alyssa Slotkin and Governor Gretchen Whitmer, have warned that continued delay will increase costs for businesses and consumers. Republican and Democratic officials in auto-dependent states have expressed similar concerns due to the bridge's importance in the North American automotive supply chain. The Ambassador Bridge's dominance is directly tied to this delay, and industry analysts estimate that the new crossing would reduce logistics costs by billions over the coming decades. From a strategic standpoint, Canada's position has remained unchanged. No new negotiation, no adjustment to the treaty framework, and no alteration of ownership or toll structure. The expectation is that economic and political pressure within the United States will ultimately force resolution. At present, the bridge stands ready, fully constructed, and fully capable of operation, but remains inactive due to unresolved political authorization. 3 possible outcomes are generally being discussed. In one scenario, the permit is approved relatively quickly, allowing the bridge to open in the near term with minimal political adjustment. In another, negotiations extend into the summer, resulting in a formal opening accompanied by political framing that preserves all existing legal agreements while allowing public face saving for all parties. In a third, prolonged delay extends into late 2026, increasing political and economic pressure from U.S. states reliant on cross-border trade, potentially leading to legal challenges and intensified federal scrutiny over the decision-making process. What remains clear is this. The bridge itself is no longer the obstacle. The structure is complete. The systems are operational. The infrastructure is ready. The dispute now exists entirely at the intersection of law, politics, and economic control over a historic trade corridor that has shaped North American commerce for nearly a century. And at the center of it all is a single unresolved authorization determining when and under what conditions one of the most significant infrastructure projects in recent decades will finally open to the public.